This may be the single greatest lesson that I've learned with my life with type 1 diabetes. And it's also going to explain why, if you can tell, I'm filming like in the middle of the night. Well, you probably can't tell because there's no windows on screen, but why I look haggard and super tired and teetering on the edge of burnout. Now, today's podcast, we're actually going to cover some vulnerable pieces to type 1 diabetes. My blood sugars took a turn for the worse and stayed there for a long time. But really, on a serious note, this one thing could mean the difference from somebody who wants to give up, coming back to try again, or actually giving up. And that's a pretty dark topic. So I do want to cover this one in depth. It's very important to me because I've had a few of those dark moments with my type 1 diabetes as well. So in today's lesson, I want to give you that number one lesson that I've learned with diabetes. I also want to throw in two other concepts that I believe will help you to make progress faster than anything else you've ever used before if you're living with type 1 diabetes like me. If you don't know who I am, my name is Matt Vandevecht. I'm a certified master fitness trainer and nutritionist living with type 1 diabetes, and now also best-selling author. So I'm really pumped about that. But it's been a lot recently, which is also why I mentioned the word burnout. So got a lot of topics to cover in a short period of time today. I hope you enjoy it. We'll start with our theme song and then jump into what I believe is a bit of a rocky story. Let's get into it. In the last month, to give you some context, I became an Ironman, so a full distance 140.6 mile race completed. Checked off the list. I also wrote a book and became a best-selling author. I didn't write the book in the last month, but it launched, became a best-selling author. Then we went for a week in Hawaii as what was supposed to be a vacation. I'm going to share with you today why it wasn't. And then came back, a couple of days of family and neighborhood events back to back to back, and then straight out for 3 days at Disneyland, which you're like, hey, that sounds fun. It was a mix. It was a mix of very fun and very not fun. And there's a number of diabetes reasons for that we'll dive into today. So as you can tell, things have been a little hectic. So in a single month, a 30-day period, Ironman, best-selling author, multiple trips. Every weekend we're traveling somewhere new because all of those things were on the road. It makes sense why somebody might feel a bit run down, right? And also, as you're probably catching on, it makes sense why the only free time that I have is here, 10 o'clock at night, filming, because this is the only free time that I have outside of running a business, an educational business for type 1 diabetes, and those living with it. So this is the only time that I have to spend on my passion projects, which is providing education for free on the internet for you guys. So for all my clients, obviously, I work with them during the daytime hours when they're available. So with today's episode, we're going to start things off with a story. First off, if you haven't heard about the Ironman story, Ironman with type 1 diabetes is insane. And I think I filmed 3 different videos on full race recaps, how I had to triple my insulin dose, and it was crazy. And honestly, somewhat dangerous, the decisions that I had to make just to stay in the race, but completed it. Now, the second piece, best-selling author. If you have not yet grabbed my new book, join hundreds, maybe thousands. I actually don't know how many copies have been sold yet, but I do know that it's been classified as a bestseller in 3 different categories as of now. If you haven't grabbed it yet, I've already received countless emails, Facebook messages, DMs on social media, people who've told me that it's already changed not only the way they look at their diabetes, but also the results. They've already tracked actual progress, taking time and range up to 80, 90, 100% and more. So if you have not yet grabbed it, it's called the Blood Sugar Freedom Formula. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's blood sugar formulas to give you freedom. And we're going to talk more about how that works towards the end of this episode as well. But go search that on Amazon. The Blood Sugar Freedom Formula. You can search my name on there too. Maybe it'll pop up. But go grab one of yours. It's life-changing. I poured my life, my heart and soul into it for years, and it's every bit of exciting as it sounds. Now, the Hawaii trip that we went on was a family trip, and it was a great time, but ultimately my blood sugars did not cooperate. Now, I entered into that trip with one focus, and that was making core memories with family. See, my daughter, she's just now turned 3, absolutely in love with the ocean and water and adventure and exercise and hiking. She's a mini me, right? It's beautiful and I love it. And so I thought, you know what? We're going to make some core memories here, and I'm really pumped about it. So I went there thinking, hey, family first, blood sugar second. Even if I have to kind of ignore the blood sugars a little bit, I want to be there for every single memory, right? We're going to just let the control maybe fall a little bit. You know, I'm known for keeping my blood sugars above 90% time in range for the last 5.5 years straight while doing all this crazy life stuff. Maybe I let it slip, you know, and just live in the moment. And so we get there, and almost immediately blood sugars were like, you're not going to pay attention to us, we're going to destroy your life. I was like, what the heck is going on? This is a weird day. Little did I know it'd be a weird week plus. But ultimately, what I ended up dealing with was higher blood sugars. Now, I actually did, and I'm going to add some context here. The 90% time in range, I also basically don't have lows, even with all the Ironman exercise that I do, because I've perfected the blood sugar formulas, especially the 80-20 blood sugar formula that I use to stay in range, right? Now, I mean, I go low maybe once every 6 months. Like, actually, I never even get below 70. It's beautiful. I love it, because I also really hate low blood sugars. There is no love-hate relationship. I just purely hate them. And there admittedly is some anxiety and fear surrounding that, because I almost died a couple of times from lows. But all that aside, I had 2 urgent lows in 1 week at Hawaii. So I gave you the context because some people are like, 2 urgent lows? I have those every day, right? I'm like, that doesn't happen to me. I had 2 in a week. That was annoying and kind of maybe second guessed my own strategies. It was like, what's going on? But in addition to that, had some really vicious high blood sugars. And a couple days into it, I'm like, something's off. You know, I'm still exercising. I'm still doing my Ironman workouts because I have another Ironman race event coming up in 5 or 6 days at this point. It's my last one of the year, and as you can tell by the sigh that I just let out, I'm excited that it's the last one. Most people don't do 4 Ironman events in a single year, with one of them being a full distance event and all of them smushed this close together. Kind of getting burnt out on the whole thing. Gonna be honest with you guys, not really feeling it. It's fun. I'm absolutely grateful that I'm able to do it, and my body and mind are willing to take on these challenges. But my goodness, it's so much. It's exhausting. Not the physical part, that too, but the mental load of balancing blood sugars and training schedules and trying to be present with my family when I'm gone for 6, 8, 10 hours in a single day for training. It's crazy. So I'm excited that it's the last one, because between Ironman, book launch, running a business, trying to help people, and also maintain family life, and there is no such thing as work-life balance in my life right now, I truthfully am on the edge of burnout. Like, that's just where I'm at. I don't need you to like, oh, Matt, we feel so sorry for you. I want to be real with you, because I know a lot of people see me and they're like, wow, how does he do it? I am constantly pushing my own limits, and to a certain degree, I like that. I live for the pursuit of what's next. I like that aspect of life, challenging myself and pushing beyond what I thought were my limitations. It's an amazing thing. But there's no break. And Hawaii was supposed to be that break, and diabetes kind of ripped that away from me. So one piece of that, I'll skim over this, but this is actually what the newsletter for our members are receiving this month, is the psychological side of type 1 diabetes, the management decisions we make that are based off of our subconscious habits, decisions, frameworks for thinking, right? But we'll get to that in a second. Well, let's get to it now. My blood sugars were high. They were enormously high. And there were a few times that I wanted to freak out and give up, right? Like sitting at 270. There's an example for you. You don't hear me talk about every day. For me, that is enormously high. It is unacceptable for what I have grown to hold as a standard for myself. It's beyond what even an accident should look like for me. So I'm sitting there and it's not coming down. More insulin, going for a walk, chugging water, doing all the right things, and then more insulin, and then more insulin, and then more insulin. Why isn't it working, right? Like borderline losing my mind here. In fact, one of these nights, I told my family the next day, we were out there with my in-laws, I was like, hey guys, hope you had a good night's sleep. I was up until 1:30 in the morning walking 8 miles around the hotel to bring down my blood sugars. And they're like, what the heck? I was like, I know. And then I had to get up at 5 a.m. to do my stinking Ironman workout. It's ridiculous, right? So with those high blood sugars, my first thought was like, maybe it's the time zones, maybe my insulin site isn't working, my insulin itself went bad because the temperature is different. I don't know. Just trying to problem solve, right? That's actually the second tip I wanted to give you guys today, is just staying curious and just being aware of these variables and thinking through what could have led to this situation instead of just attacking it with insulin, right? Because I easily could have just said, that's weird, it's super high, stack insulin, and then move on, which, you know, in some circumstances you may have to do. But in this case, it's more beneficial for me to, yes, try to treat the problem, give more insulin, go for a walk, drink water, whatever, but to also be curious about what the heck's going on. So that's tip number 2. But tip number 1, actually, as we go deeper into this story, you'll understand it a bit more. Every single day, having these high blood sugars, my wife even started to notice. I was like, shoot, family vacation. My whole goal here was to be present with them, and they're noticing that blood sugars are getting in the way, right? So my plan kind of backfired. And at this point, the whole like ignore the blood sugars a little bit and focus on family, couldn't do that anymore. Blood sugars were demanding my attention, right? As they tend to do when they're not in control. You hear more alarms, you feel sick, you're always questioning your decisions. Did I dose for that? Did I count the carbs correctly? What's going on? So this is actually leading into tip number 3 for today. I know we skipped number 1. We're going to get to it. But tip number 3 ultimately is that if you let your blood sugars go wildly out of control, it backfires and actually pulls you back into restriction, into a lower quality of life, into less peace of mind. I've found that if you give blood sugars a little bit of attention up front, you really don't have to worry about them as much later on. So just doing a little bit of work now has a big benefit later. But if you don't put that little bit of work in and give it just a little bit of attention, right? Just checking in, showing it some love, you get slapped across the face later on in the day. It wrecks your schedule, your quality of life. Now, back to tip number 1 and the whole reason for today's episode. See, my decisions were ultimately influenced by my subconscious fears. My subconscious fear is that I will have a low blood sugar and then get in the way of the family doing something. So the last thing I want is to have an urgent low where I'm like, hey, everybody stop what you're doing. Matt has to deal with his diabetes. I don't want to cause a scene. I don't want to be an issue or a burden, right? I just want to be there. I want to be normal. I want to be part of the family and everybody just enjoy it. Now, family, they're fantastic. They would understand. They'd be like, oh, absolutely. Let's stop so Matt can fix his blood sugars, right? They're very supportive. I love them to death. But I don't want to be a burden, right? I don't want to cause a change of plans. I don't want to be the reason we miss a scheduled appointment. But here's the thing. My in-laws don't follow a schedule, which, I mean, there's pros and cons to it, but I'm very used to having calendar events on my phone, right? Every hour there's a thing happening. I'm like, it's time for this meeting. It's time for this chores. It's time for dinner. It's time for running errands, whatever it is. I operate on a schedule. So when there's no schedule, I have a hard time operating, but diabetes is also more difficult to operate, right? When you don't know the carb counts, because we're just going out to different restaurants all the time. And then if you don't know the schedule, especially the activity level after a meal. So at every meal, I'm guessing not only on the carb counts, that throws the base plan off, but I'm also guessing on what's the plan after the meal. Are we going to go walk on the beach? Are we going to go for a bike ride? Are we going to sit and watch a hula dancing show, right? Like, what are we doing? So because of those two unknowns, it was very difficult to plan ahead for blood sugars. And as a result, knowing that there's the potential that we would maybe want to go do something, have some fun, and then I ruin the plan with an urgent low. I was like, let's just dose on the safe side, pull back a little bit. Maybe if I need to dose 6 units, I'll give 5 and then give the 6th one later when I know we're not going to be active, right? I'm trying to think ahead. But 2, I noticed I had a pattern of eating lower carbs. I was like, lower carbs, lower risk, right? We all heard that one before from someone who rhymes with Smernstein. I don't fully agree with. But I found myself trying to utilize that as a strategy and was like, why am I eating low carb, But, calories got to come from somewhere. So I ended up replacing the missing calories from less carbs with proteins and fats. You guys followed me for a while probably. So, and if you haven't, you're new here, I'll explain it. Proteins and fats do impact blood sugars. It just takes longer, right? So I'm eating a lot of foods that are higher in proteins and fats, which means blood sugars go up and they get stuck in the higher zones. Now, in that decision-making process, I was actually unaware of my snacking and ordering routines until my wife brought it up even. I was like, I'm eating lower carbs, so it should be working, but I'm giving like double the insulin, triple the insulin. And she's like, well, Matt, do you think you're pulling back because of fear, right? Pulling back from higher doses of insulin, and that you're consuming higher fats and higher proteins as a result because you're just snacking throughout the day. And I was like, gosh, dang it. Yeah, right. But that was not the solution, unfortunately, because there were a number of factors at play. And ultimately, before this drags out too long, I had high blood sugars the whole week, minus the 2 urgent lows, right, from stacking. That was actually the night. Here's the story behind it. Lots of insulin, plus 8 miles of walking right before bed, went to bed, and then eventually it all kicks in. I also had a boost of insulin sensitivity from the walking, urgent low at 4 a.m. So fun. So ultimately, lesson number 1, and the most important lesson I think I have ever learned, is that you got to give yourself grace. I so badly wanted to give up and say, screw it, I'm just going to sit at 300 for the rest of the trip. I am so ready to just give up. Now, for me personally, I have a core belief that I don't give up, but there are times like that where I get close, where I'm like, but I really just don't want to try anymore because I've been trying so hard and it's not working, right? And I know a lot of you feel that way with blood sugars. This is one of those very rare circumstances these days where for a couple of days it was mysterious to me. I was like, I don't know what's going on. I can't figure it out. And this is just pissing me off, right? These high blood sugars, tons of insulin being given, lots of walking and interruptions. And it was frustrating as heck. And I remember many, many years ago, before I discovered the blood sugar formulas, I used to look at my blood sugars as just chaos that I was trying to control to the best of my ability, thinking that diabetes didn't follow rules, that there were no rules, right? And now I know better. Now we know, of course, every blood sugar has a reason that it exists. We might not know the reason, but it's happening for a reason, right? And we're just probably ignorant to whatever the factor is. And sometimes it's internal. Sometimes it might be your hormones fluctuated that day. You didn't do that, right? But knowing that every blood sugar has a reason can be helpful, but also recognizing that you don't have power over every single one of those reasons. And you're also doing the job of an organ that wasn't supposed to fail in the first place. Like, you're a person, not a pancreas, right? And you're trying to do the job of a pancreas 24/7. That's a lot. So remembering to give yourself grace and being like, man, I am trying really hard, right? And maybe you don't try your best all the time, but in this case, I was trying my best and it still wasn't working. Still had some messy numbers. Now, granted, and I might have already had the team put screenshots on this video. If you've seen it, maybe they're popping up now, but a lot of these higher blood sugars, they came back down relatively quickly, which did allow me to maintain excellent time and range on paper, right? The experience itself sucked. It was horrendous. But the second it would start to go up, I would aggressively, and I do not recommend this is not medical advice, but for me, I recognized my patterns and my formulas were shifting, so I aggressively added insulin, chugged water, go for a walk, see a family, or actually most of the time I was like, Brooklyn, my daughter, it's like, you want to go run? And she's just as active as I am. So she loved it. She was like, let's go run. Let's go swim. And I'm like, right on. Let's go. This is going to help the insulin work faster. But giving myself grace, because it didn't make sense at first. And looking back, it still was frustrating. Even though I can see now why it kind of happened. I'm like, dude, that sucked. It took up such a large chunk of my vacation with my family. It was supposed to be the big break that I had, right? Finally, some time off to relax, and nope, diabetes rears its ugly head. So, reminder for all of us to give yourself some grace. You deal with this stuff day in and day out, and whether you have it really well controlled in general, like me, or maybe your life is chaotic right now, and maybe what I just described is your norm. That's a lot of work to deal with that day in and day out, right? And I'd like to add, that doesn't have to be your norm, right? I got back from Hawaii and I was like, done, reset button, we fixed it. I got back into a steady groove, was able to get back on track, right? And that's the power of blood sugar formulas, and it's exactly why you should go buy the book, The Blood Sugar Freedom Formula, because formulas give you that freedom back. But in Hawaii, I fear that being on the edge of burnout is one of the reasons why I missed a few of the key points that my wife actually had to help me identify. Because I stopped caring. Not completely, but I noticed that trend a little bit. And it was because I'm coming off of a very busy season in life with the Ironman, the book launch, some family events, some stuff going on behind the scenes that I don't really talk about. There's just a lot going on in life, and I think that diabetes pushed me over or pushed me very close to the edge. And when that happens and we stop taking care of ourselves or just not focusing as much, diabetes can wreak havoc. And I find that if you let it get out of control, it demands more of you and has a far-reaching impact on the rest of life. And that's why freedom is such a big focus in my book, but also in my work, because that's what we're all after, right? Is freedom, to not be tied down by restriction within diabetes or by rough blood sugars that remove us from being present. So tip number one is to give yourself grace, because this is a lot to deal with day in and day out. Whether you're controlled or not, whether you're trying hard or not, it's just a lot. It really is. So give yourself some grace. Now, tip number two is to stay curious. Now, if I just throw insulin at my problems, sure, I might fix it. But if I don't know why, I'm doomed to repeat those problems until I identify the root cause. So you gotta get curious about why the blood sugars are doing what they're doing. And in Hawaii, it took me a couple of days to even remotely get close to figuring things out. And even still, it was tough. I had to fall back on giving myself grace. But the third part of this, as a reminder to all my renegade warriors. And if you see my shirt, that's exactly what it says. You look at the bottom right there, that's what I'm about to say. Tip number 3 is to think differently, right? A lot of traditional advice would have steered me further away from a solution on that trip in Hawaii. They would not have even considered proteins and fats. They wouldn't have considered the subconscious decision-making frameworks that led me to changing how I manage my diabetes without me even recognizing it. You got to think differently about your diabetes management if you expect different and better outcomes. Now, along that route of thinking differently, I am again going to recommend, of course, that you grab the book. The book has start to finish everything you need to hitting your first or next 90% time in range. And I literally wrote it out step by step. It's everything and more that you would need. And I truly hope that it helps you as much as it helps my clients and has helped me in the past. But when I tell you to think differently, the key for me is that going into Hawaii, I thought, hey, I'm going to focus less on diabetes and more on family. And I forgot that that's backwards. If I want to focus more on family, I have to set myself up for success by focusing more initially on my diabetes, right? Set the plan in place so that you can enjoy with more quality of life, more peace of mind, more certainty behind your blood sugar numbers. So it's not that you should focus less on blood sugars to gain more freedom. It's actually that you should focus more of your intention on blood sugars so that you can have freedom. Because if you set yourself up correctly with the right blood sugar formula, you don't have to check in as often. You don't have to worry about the what ifs, right? At least not as often. So that's the third takeaway. When you're thinking differently, we got to flip that script. It's not, I want to focus on family, therefore I'm not going to focus on blood sugars. It seems that way, like you can only pick one, but it's more of, instead of a pick one or the other, it's a pick one and then the other, right? So it's pick blood sugars so that you can live your best life. The focus goes to the blood sugars first, and then from there it disperses to every other aspect of your life. When blood sugars cooperate, you feel better, you think better, you act better, you enjoy more of life. That's the goal. Right. So I hope this one was helpful for you. I lost my whole train of thought. I was like, should I tell them? I am very familiar with burnout, and I recognize the patterns now. I am not burnt out currently, but I share this because I want you to know that burnout's very real. It's very common, but not a lot of people talk about it. And for me, it's not just diabetes. Like right now, things are better, right, with the blood sugars, but the rest of life is still chaotic. We're still traveling every weekend, and there is no spare time for us. Every ounce of spare time that I have goes to my daughter, right? And that's 100% okay with that. I love her. But when life gets this crazy, you have to have blood sugar formulas. And for all my high performers out there, non-negotiable. Without blood sugar formulas, I would not be able to do this. I would have burnt out by now, and it would not look good. And it would have far-reaching impacts on my relationships, on my productiveness with work, on my mental health, on a lot of stuff. So really, formulas equal freedom. And that's exactly what I want to share with you today. So step one, or tip one, give yourself grace. Tip number two, you got to stay curious. Why are the blood sugars doing what they're doing? Get to the core. And tip number three, you got to think differently. And I hope that's helpful for you. I hope you, if it's the right person, I hope this resonates with you. If you're experiencing some level or some degree of burnout, reach out for help if you need it. And this is a conversation that I have with people who are close to me when I notice patterns of burnout. Like, hey, I need a little extra help. Right, calling in some favors, and sometimes it's just having a conversation and seeing where you're at with that. I totally forgot to tell you guys about Disneyland. So I crawled back out here from bed, and yes, I'm wearing a different shirt. This is another triathlon shirt. I think I did like 7 triathlons this year. 4 of them are Ironman events. Anyways, Disneyland, right? I had to squeeze this into this episode because at Disneyland, the quote-unquote happiest place in the world, right? We're like, let's take Brooklyn there. She loves Disney stuff. And to be fair, it was magical watching her experience the magic of Disney. That was the best. She got to meet a bunch of the princesses and have like one-on-one interactions with them. And oh my goodness, made my day. However, my insulin stopped working like from arrival. And if you ever have insulin not work, that also means you can't eat food. So how I knew this happened, I'd give a large dose of insulin, watch my CGM for the anticipated drop in blood glucose that tells me it's okay to start eating now, right? Never happened. I didn't get to eat multiple meals, and over the course of multiple days, walking, 50,000 steps in total in a severe caloric deficit, I got to experience not only anger towards my blood sugars, but also what is known as bonking or hitting the wall. Ultimately, that much activity with a severe caloric deficit, like not eating hardly anything, right? There's just no available energy for your body to use for movement. So my body started shutting down and my brain stopped working normally. I actually got lost trying to find our hotel. Like I had to walk back to get more insulin because I was like, okay, clearly something's wrong. I'm going on like multiple meals that just I've given, 10 units of insulin and nothing has happened. It's just gone higher, right? Oh, goodness. I was like, I'm going to go back to the hotel. And on my way back to the hotel, I got lost by myself. I was like, I don't know where I am, and I don't know how to figure this out. My brain stopped functioning properly. It's been rough, to say the least. But how also interesting is it that our blood glucose has such a far-reaching impact on so many areas of our lives: cognitive function, physical ability, the systems inside, the health of our organs, our mood even, believe it or not, right? But my goodness, I had to hop in here and tell you at least a little snippet of the Disney experience, because while I was present, I walked the whole day. We went on the rides, did the parade, both parks. It was fantastic. But my goodness, diabetes sucks sometimes. So if you ever think about you having a rough day, you're like, I'm the only person that has a rough day. Even people who supposedly have it all figured out still have days where it's like, my insulin stopped working. I did everything right, and yet still had a really hard day. So give yourself grace. All right, back to the other version of me that was recording this hours ago. So again, hope this is helpful. And I do discuss pieces of mental health in the book as well. I go into some of those darker moments that I've had with near-death experiences, but also with mental breakdowns, depression, suicidal ideations, and pretty gnarly stuff. So I'd grab the book, whether you like a good story, a good learning lesson, maybe a bit of both. The Blood Sugar Freedom Formula. If you've already got it, by the way, would love to see your thoughts. I know a lot of people are leaving reviews now, and that certainly helps others to know who might not see these videos or hear these podcasts, helps them to know if they should even give it a try. Right? And your review might be the reason they decide to pick up a book that changes their life forever. So if you haven't yet, please go leave a review. Be the change you want to see in the world. Appreciate you. Have a great rest of your day. And again, if you're experiencing any level, any degree of burnout, please do seek help. Reach out to us, your community, your loved ones, someone. It's okay to ask. And keep up the fight.